to the Self-Care Diaries. Today I have a very dear friend of mine with me, Lauren Turner, and one of our trainers at the Selfcare Academy at Leigh Joy Inspires Associates. And today we're going to speak all about self-care, but from the leadership space. Lauren Turner is a facilitator and a trainer, and she specializes in development and leadership. Welcome, my friend. It's so lovely to have you in the hot seat.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So exciting. So one of the reasons we decided to do these interviews is you're one of the trainers that Yoka van Dam, you and myself, we run the online as well as in-person self-care workshops. And we thought to have a conversation so that we could get people to have a little bit of a feel about who we are and our passion for self-care. So tell me first, how did you get involved in the leadership and development space?
Oh, wow. Great question. So my background, I started out my career in the aviation industry, aircraft sales, and I very quickly moved into a sales team leadership space. I worked in the United States, in the United Arab Emirates, in India, in New Delhi, leading aircraft sales teams. And what I really realized through that journey was that there was a massive disconnect between the performance around sales and, the science and the numbers and hitting targets, and the reality of the humans and their abilities to perform at a high level, and the psychology of it and the dynamics between the different sales members, and why some sales guys performed really well and others didn't, and then the relationships between the salespeople and the customers. And I became a bit of a student, I suppose, of why some relationships worked and why some didn't, the value of communication, how much toxic relationships cause damage within sales teams. And over a period of a number of years, I became more and more passionate about that side of the work and less interested, or I suppose maybe I outgrew the pure sales stuff. So I decided to make a change, to take what I'd learned from those years within the aircraft sales environment, and then use that as a foundation to move more into facilitation, training, helping teams with regards to cohesion and effectiveness and that kind of stuff. So, and I've been in that space ever since.
That's so fascinating. Like, and you're a military brat, as you call yourself. Your dad,
absolutely.
Mom went military.
Both of them. I was born on an Air Force base, so I mean, you couldn't get more military brat. Born literally in the clinic at the Air Force base in Petersburg. My father's a fighter pilot, or was a fighter pilot. He's in his 60s now, so it would be dangerous if he was still flying combat aircraft. And my mother was an air traffic controller. They met in the military and grew up within that space. So also learned a lot of lessons with regards to leadership and with regards to how to deal with people, how to inspire people, how to build integrity and trust within a team, from sort of military learnings and how combat teams perform together as a unit. How do they communicate? The autonomy and accountability that comes from that upbringing is something that I really am very passionate about, and something that I still try to weave into the facilitation and training that I do, not only because I can speak about it from an authentic place, because it's something that I really live and believe, but also I really just feel like there's so many good leadership lessons that come from a military context.
For sure. And I mean, Simon Sinek is one of my favorite leadership thought leaders that does incredible work around military and how to create trust, or how he uses the military as an example of how trust is created. It's, yeah, I think that you've got a lot to bring to this world. So what would your definition of self-care be?
So I think it's evolved over time. If you had to have asked me that 15 years ago, I think I would have been a very different answer. I probably didn't even have any reality of self-care when I was in my early 20s. And I think that's to some degree the tragedy is that when we're younger, there's so much angst. There's so much angst, and there's we hold ourselves to impossible standards. And I know for myself, certainly, I was such a perfectionist, and I was white knuckling life all the time, and really didn't focus on this idea of self-care at all. And I think one of my missions with regards to self-care now is to, how can we start folding in this idea of self-care with younger people, with younger generations, where we can start getting some conversation going with people that are still in their early 20s, that are just so driven and so focused, and sometimes burning themselves out at a very young age, or causing a lot of damage, failed relationships, all this kind of thing, because the concept and the idea of self-care, I think to some degree, tragically, only becomes more of a focus as we started maturing and getting a little bit older, which it certainly was my journey. I hit 30 years old, completely fixated on work, to the detriment of everything else in my life, very obsessive, held myself to an impossibly high standard, would punish myself internally if I, hadn't achieved what I felt like I needed to achieve. I don't need anybody. I can stand on my own 2 feet. I'm bulletproof. I'm hyper independent. And it's only through going through the process of turning 30, starting to get a little bit older, realizing that despite my reasonably high levels of success for my age, I was miserable. I hated the person that I was. I was surrounded by toxic relationships that didn't add value to my life. I was still single at the time, which for me was devastating, because I had all these grand plans of the, white picket fence and the 2 children, and my life working out. So there was a need to let go of some of that control of feeling like I could hold on to everything, and if I tried hard enough, that I could make everything be the way I wanted it to be. And that's really where self-care started for me, was really just having to look inwards, I suppose, and really start looking at building some awareness of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Probably most importantly, the ugly, right? Because that's the hard stuff to really deal with. That's the painful stuff to deal with. But self-awareness has really been my, and the regulation that comes with that self-awareness of saying, well, why do I feel this way? Why is this important to me? Why do I react in these specific situations? And then learning through being more present and being more conscious and being more aware, and more internalizing that thought process to really start building some new habits and some new behaviors. So that's where my self-care practice really started, and what it means to me started from that foundation. And then from there, it's been built into spending more time outside and making sure I get fresh air, and getting more out of my head and into my body. So being aware of what my body's telling me, being aware of breath, being aware of sleep, being aware of all of these things, which I tie back to awareness. So physical awareness and mental awareness, and finding that balance, and being able to regulate what's important in terms of that self-care practice.
I love that. I love that you didn't automatically go to what you do physically, like you have facials and massages and go for a run and pound the
So
paper.
I actually hate going for facials and manicures and pedicures. I find, and this gives you maybe some clarity around the neuroticism that I've had to get over. Like, I perceive that as a waste of time.
Mm.
Can we just get done? Like, I want my nails to be pretty, but I don't want to sit there for an hour having them done. Same with the hairdresser. I want to have my hair looking like I look after myself, but to take the time, to give myself the time to actually go and enjoy the process of being pampered. I like frustrated, like, get off me, stop massaging me, can we just get done? Can we just get done? Go, 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 go. So it's been far more around, for me, the self-care started around analyzing those thought processes. And my work has certainly helped me and given me a lot of skills. And the self-care tripod model has given me so many skills around practical, real things that I can think about and analyze to be able to answer that why question of, why are my behaviors and why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? And then through that, the physical self-care side has started.
I think I speak to a variety of different clients, and they'll say to me, when they first come to see me, I'll say, so tell me about your self-care practice. And some women will say, oh, I have a manicure once a week or a facial once a month or whatever. And I'll be, okay, so, and what is the emotional work that you're doing? They'll be like, well, that's why I'm here. So I'm like, okay, cool. So what I'd like you to see is your manicures and facials. Those are gifts to yourself for doing what you call the hard work, facing yourself, the self-awareness. So if you and the physical side of self-care, like running and gymming and all of that, that's important, but it's not the only way that we self-care. So we're doing the tripod model that you mentioned, and Yoka, yourself, and myself, we run these workshops, and we've divided the workshop into 3 sections: the self-care, the tribe care, and the sacred care. And the self-care, as we've been speaking now, has got to do with the emotional, mental, social, professional, and physical aspect of self-care. Then there's the tribe care, which yoga speaks to, and that's got to do with how do we set boundaries, how do we communicate effectively, assertively, how do we teach others how to treat us, what kind of accountability partners do we want to have in our lives, who's in our tribe, that kind of thing. And then the sacred care, which I speak to, has got to do with more of where do you lean into finding your inspiration. So one doesn't have to be spiritual or religious, or I mean, it can be agnostic, atheist, but where in your life do you draw that inspiration from? How do you tap into your intuition? What is your purpose? So the bigger questions. There's a lot of value that you've brought to the workbook that's online, the Kindle workbook. You've brought a lot of value to that, and I really wanted to say thank you to you for I didn't want to just give you a reference. I had to give you a shout out as well.
Thank you.
Really beautiful stuff there around self-awareness and triggers and resilience. And what would you say? I know it's hard because that the self-care is quite a big piece of the workshop. It's a lot of information, and it really is a great way to lay the foundation for the rest of the day workshop. But what is for you been the highlight of the self-care section of the tripod model?
The self section.
Yeah.
Oh, the highlight. So interestingly enough, I think the highlight of the self section for me is the stuff that I'm least comfortable with. So the way that the self model is built, as I said, it starts with awareness and regulation, triggers, all the things that we've spoken about. But then towards the end of the self section, we go into discussing limiting core beliefs, and that for me is, again, because I'm used to really having a tough shell and feeling like I'm bulletproof to some degree, really starting to unpack those limiting core beliefs and what they look like, and the forgiveness process that's associated with the limiting core beliefs, for me was the most inspiring portion. Possibly because it's the hardest, it's also the most rewarding, but very powerful when you can start building clarity around what those limiting core beliefs are. And I really strongly believe that once you understand something, it loses its power. You know, if you're able to look at it and understand where it comes from, the why of it, because, you know, so often it's just these feelings, it's just this feeling of discomfort, this feeling of being out of balance, but you're not really super clear why, in different situations where you get challenged in different ways, or you responding in terms of your emotional reactions to situations, but not really sure of where it's coming from. But by unpacking those limiting core beliefs, I felt that there was a huge amount of clarity through that process of why certain behaviors have manifested in specific ways, why I'm triggered by certain situations. And while it was a very difficult process to go through, and I mean, you often describe it when we're discussing it as those sticky, icky feelings that you have to sit with, and you have to have the courage to go through that process, which isn't easy. It isn't easy. But if you're willing to do that work, there is a massive reward on the other side of it. So that was a very surprising experience that I had, because initially I was like, oh, you know, okay. But by leaning into it and by being open to that process, which you've always said, like, encourage yourself to lean into it and lean into the discomfort of it. I found that it ended up being a massive highlight for me, which was surprising, but appreciated.
Yeah, I remember the one workshop that we did together online, and how it was like toffee. I could feel the energy, even though it was online. It was like this toffee of encouraging the participants, and us included, to go through
Yeah.
the process of bearing, you know, like really being curious about what are the things that are holding me back, and to bring that to the fore so that we can let it go, so that we can
Yeah.
we can acknowledge it, we can let it go. And it was so powerful, and I could feel like even you and Yoko were like,
Because it's uncomfortable.
ah,
It really is very uncomfortable, and it's not a, you know, I think human beings, we are naturally, I don't know if it's almost a survival instinct, where we're looking for pleasure, we're looking for comfort, we're looking for things to feel good all the time. And when we're forced into that kind of situation, the easier response is to pull away. And when you force yourself to lean into that discomfort, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, it's not easy. It really, really isn't. But you have to walk through it. You absolutely have to get through to the other side. And I don't think everybody does. I think some people try. And I mean, I think that's why the work that we're doing is so important, is because we create a framework and a support system that creates a safe space for people to take that journey with other people that perhaps have been through it, and open some of those doors to facilitate that process as a collective.
yeah. And I mean, it's in the work I've done it with people individually, and I've done it in the group setting, and I find the limiting core belief work so much more profound in a group setting, because of the echo chamber that we do and everything. But what was, like, we've spoken about how tricky it is to start any growth process, right? To go, I mean, whether we're going to see a psychologist, or we, you know, pick up a book, or whatever journey that we start on to to gain clarity and become more conscious in our lives is there's a tough start to it, and then we've got to kind of push through the process if we think about the growth curve, and then at the end we get through and we're like, oh, thank you Jesus, even if we just got through it. But hopefully people get through the other end and are like, okay, cool, my load is actually lighter. Having gone through because in the training, when I train you guys, I take you through the process as a participant first before I train you as the trainer, because I want you to experience what it feels like to go through the process as a participant, so that you can so it's an embodied experience for you. So if you'd like to, please don't feel that you have to, but when you went through that process of the limiting core beliefs, what did you come out with at the other end? What was the gift for you in pushing through those difficult feelings?
So for me, the biggest thing was the realization or connecting the dots that I was brought up, as we've already discussed, in a military home where there was not a lot of space for feeling sorry for yourself, asking for help, saying that I'm not coping. Which was a very positive thing in one sense, because it gave me all the independence and the drive and the focus that I needed to achieve everything that I've achieved in my life. But it also had an element of creating this mindset of, you can't rely on other people. You have to be perfect all the time. You can't accept a hand if it's held out for you to help you. To the point that I realized, separate to this, like my husband and I really enjoy hiking. And often when we used to go hiking, if there was like a little tricky patch, or there was a little stream or a slippery rock or whatever it was, my husband would put his hand out to help me, right? And I perceived that as, you're weak, you can't do it yourself, let me help you because you can't do it. And that used to irritate me. I don't need your help. Like, it's a rock, I can get over the rock. And when I adjusted my mindset to be around, it's support, you're better together. Even if it's just thank you for loving me enough to be willing to put your hand out to help. And yes, of course you can get over the rock yourself, but you don't have to, because you've got someone there that loves you and is supporting you and is willing to give you that extra stability that you might need in that moment. And that was one of the big things that came out for me in limiting core beliefs, is that I don't have to hold it all on my own. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be perfect all the time and be independent all the time, and that you need to open yourself up a little bit and build some vulnerability if you really want to have those deep, meaningful connections and relationships. And I knew that was a part of me, but I hadn't connected that to what I'd been coached and taught as a child, with my parents, of course, having the best of intentions. They were not trying to create this incredibly hard shell. But, it happened regardless. So it's about finding that balance. Yes, I'm still strong. Yes, I'm still independent. Yes, I can still run my life, and I can be in charge of my destiny. And I have no problem with that. But also understanding that there is a balance in there, because having other people around you and allowing other people in and allowing other people to support you and help you is also very important. It's part of living a full life. So that was my journey, and it was very, very powerful to connect the dots. Like, I had the dots, but I hadn't connected them. So that was amazing for me. Not easy, but amazing.
Yeah, not easy, but really beautiful to come through the other end and go. I hear how you went from a space of being very like fiercely independent to moving to a space of interdependence. So you can acknowledge at moments where you can stand on your own 2 feet, and it's important for you to do that, but then at other times to ask for help, or just hold your husband's hand while you climb a rock, like that's like you offering him the gift of being there for you. And often we
Exactly.
realize that when we're fiercely independent, we take away people's opportunity of showing us care. And having that awareness, having that consciousness allows us not to show up as like poor little princesses in need of salvation, um,
Mm.
but in some way there is a need of salvation from our idea that we can do it all on our own, and actually it does take somebody else. It does take somebody else
Oh, sure.
to be there for us.
For sure. I mean, when you realize you actually don't have it all figured out and you actually don't have all the answers, and I'm a far happier, calmer, more balanced human being now that I've opened myself up to the fact that I do need other people. There's a huge amount of freedom that comes with that process of just letting it go, building some flexibility and adaptability into my self-care practice as well. So again, maybe not the most obvious application of self-care, but realizing that I cope better with life stresses when I allow for some flexibility and adaptability. And I think people that are very structured and are very controlling, and I'm sure all the A types out there listening to this are going to be nodding and smiling, but you feel it's counterintuitive because you feel like, well, if I'm adaptable or flexible, then I'm going to lose control and everything is going to fall apart and it's going to be this huge mess. And then I'm going to have to tidy up the mess because nobody can tidy it. It's rubbish. Because as soon as you start letting go and you think, okay, well, it's not such a big deal. Okay, so things have changed and I'm going to roll with these changes instead of being like, freaking out about it, you suddenly realize, wow, this feels a lot nicer. This actually feels a lot better. I'm not suffering from tension headaches and like feeling like I want to vomit because something hasn't gone according to plan. And then I just feel like last comment on the subject is that it is a practice and it does take time and it feels very uncomfortable in the beginning. But I found from personal real experience that the more I challenge myself into that different space, the easier it gets. And to the point that now I sometimes surprise myself where I'm like, wow, like our car broke down yesterday and I had to have it towed this morning. 5 years ago, that would have ruined me for days. What are we going to do? And oh no, all my plans. Now I don't, and we have no car. As I'm sitting here right now, I have a golf cart. If I need to go somewhere, a golf cart. Because we're at a golf course at the moment. It's not because we just have a golf cart around. And I'm surprised how little it bothers me. I'm just like, nothing I can do about it. So might as well just get on with life, which is, if you had met me 10 years ago, that's astounding that I've gotten to that point in terms of self-care, that kind of stuff doesn't bother me anymore.
And that's such a beautiful point to end our discussion on today, is the gift of self-care really is a gift to ourselves and to the people that love us. Because when we're not self-caring, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, professionally, physically even, we're a nightmare to be around. I know I am. I can't speak for you, but for me, I'm a nightmare to be around.
100%. 100%.
Neurotic, obsessive, my thinking is addictive, my behavior is addictive. I'm not a pretty person to be around. And I also realized that there were some pretty shitty things that happened to me as a child growing up, but I slowly but surely started become those people that I so promised I wouldn't become one day. And And it was only when I came into recovery nearly 13 years ago, that I started to realize, but I was going in that way because I wasn't self-aware. I wasn't conscious about my behavior. It was all obsessive and neurotic and addictive. Um, so yes, I'm so grateful to have you on my team, Lauren. Really, I absolutely adore you. I'm so grateful that we've met. You've done some amazing work with the team already, and where we are today and what we've created, I could not have done on my own. I'm really grateful for your support and what you bring to the table. I thank you for today, for being vulnerable and speaking to us on self-care and what this journey has meant for you.
You know, I enjoy this time with you, Leigh, so much, and all the respect and gratitude back to you in terms of the journey. I feel equally blessed to have you in my life. So thank you for having me part of the team.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody, for watching. There will be links to Lauren's website. I'll put in the at the bottom of the video, and go check her out. And if you're keen to join us on one of our workshops, then please feel free to get hold of us. I wish you a beautiful, beautiful day, and don't forget to self-care.